I don't want to take you off of the replacements, but I want to ask you specifically something you wrote about was um, when you transition from the replacements to touring with REM. And you, so yes, if you please talk a little bit about that. But I'm also curious to know if you, in hindsight, and I know this isn't in the book, you just wrote about this, but I'm curious. You brought it to the band when you had the opportunity to tour with REM. You brought it to the band because you want to the replacements because you wanted to make sure that this was okay with them because of your longstanding relationship, and your perception was that nobody had any issue with it. They were fully supportive of it. But then you found out many years later that there was a possibility that they were resentful that you left
True.
them then.
True. Well, it was actually not. I mean, I knew there was trouble much sooner than many years later. The order of events was in May of 1983. We had just gotten back from our first major tour, going to the East Coast and back, and REM had already been pounding the pavement, really, really touring hard. And although they had just put out their first album. They had only had the Radio Free Europe single out, so it took them a while to, get a full, well, and the Chronic Town EP, of course. So anyway, in May of '83, REM and the Replacements and a couple other bands played a show together in Minneapolis at a place called Navy Island, which is a little island in the Mississippi River in St. Paul, and I had gotten to know the REM guys when they first came to town. We had gone crazy over that Radio Free Europe single, and we sold so many of them that even though their first appearance in Minneapolis was during a massive blizzard on Thanksgiving night, there were still 100 people there. And people, like I fought my way through snowbanks to get to the First Avenue. It was at that time, it was still called Sam's or Uncle Sam's. And so anyway, the band was blown away. It was the furthest away from their home of the Southeast, Athens, Georgia. They couldn't believe they had that many people there. They figured the show was going to be canceled. And in fact, there were two rooms there, the main room, which had about 1,100 capacity, and a small room, which was 250 capacity. REM were booked in the small room, and the headliner that night in the main room canceled because they couldn't get there because of the blizzard. But REM, of course, being the warriors that they are, they made it there. And the owner of First Avenue, or the guy who ran the club, said, well, let's just consolidate and put REM in the main room and just close the 7th Street entry part. And so there was still a bunch of people there. And because by that time we'd probably gone through hundreds, 300-400 copies of Radio Free Europe at Orfolk. Everybody loved it. I mean, hearing that record for the first time, it was like one of those things where you just knew they didn't sound like anybody else. That you could certainly hear influences, the Rickenbacker sound from the Byrds or whatever it was, but it was just, they were really, I think I said it in the book, they were a bona fide phenomenon on the strength of a single 45. I mean, it was just so completely apparent. And so anyway, you get up to 1983. I was friends with the band, and Peter Buck had already been crashing on my couch a whole bunch when they'd come through town, so we were quite close. And I went with them after the Navy Island show to Wisconsin and saw them play in Madison and Milwaukee just for kicks. And after the Madison show, I was thinking, okay, I'm going to go home now, and I don't know when I'm going to see these guys again. And they not only were my two favorite bands in the world at the time were the Replacements and REM. Not only were they one of my favorite bands, but they had become good friends. And I was sad that, oh shit, I just saw them in Minneapolis and then twice in Wisconsin. And I was kind of down in the dumps a little bit. And Peter just came up to me and said, hey, are you doing okay? And I said, yeah, just a little melancholy about, leaving, and he said, well, we've been talking. Would you like to road manage us for a bit? And I was like, are you kidding me? I am not worthy. And so I just thought this would be a great opportunity in a business sense to learn what it was like a couple of rungs up the ladder from what the Replacements were doing. And I genuinely felt that way. And I said, well, I'd love to do it, but I got to talk to the Replacements about it. If they have any qualms, I'm going to have to say no. And he said, I totally understand. We don't want to take you away from the Replacements. We don't want to affect your work with the Replacements. And I thought that was very very cool. Another cool thing about REM. So I called a meeting with the Replacements and I explained it all. And I said, I'm going to meet other people. They're with, IRS records. They're with FBI booking. We're going to be playing bigger rooms. This could be an advantage for the replacements to make new contacts. And everybody said, this sounds great, Peter. We had a roadie named Tom Carlson who said, I can handle things while you're away for whatever dates you have to miss. And it really seemed all positive, or I would not have done it. If they had said, oh, God, I don't know, that makes me uncomfortable, I would have said, okay, done. I won't take the job. Absolutely, I would have done that. But they were all just in agreement. So I told REM I'd take the gig. And then right away, as our relationship continued to develop, and we were booking a summer tour, Peter says, hey, would you guys like to do some dates with us in the summer? And I was like, hell yeah. So I put their agent and our agent together, and we got 15 dates opening for REM. I mean, it was like nobody of the stature of REM were offering the replacements those kind of shows. It was really a great opportunity. So benefits already began immediately. And then the day we left for the first gig on the REM replacements tour was in Indianapolis, and I wanted to make most of the drive the day before the first show, so we could be fresh for the first night and all that stuff. So we're going to drive part way there and then get up the next morning and have an hour or two to drive in to the first gig. And we pulled over in Wisconsin at one point on the drive. It's nighttime, and we were just stopping for a drink, to break up the drive a little bit. And Westerberg started getting snarky with me. And I was like, where is this coming from? I mean, I hadn't had any snarkiness from him up to that point. And I finally said, what the hell's wrong with you, Paul? And he said, don't you understand, Peter? You're not one of us anymore. And I was like, what? And he said, and I don't know what he said. Did he say, yeah, you took the fucking job with REM or whatever? But anyway, it was very clear that had rankled him. And I was just like, what am I going to do? I mean, I was just crushed. And I didn't know what to do. So I just kept my mouth shut. And I thought, I guess I'm just going to do my job and see if this blows over. And if it doesn't, I'll deal with, the consequences. And it ended up, kind of balancing out. And at a certain point, Paul seemed to put his feelings aside. And, that was after those dates with REM, we started making the album that became Let It Be. And he and I were really, really, really involved together on that. And all of the songs that were coming in. And I think he needed the support that I had given him in the past, and maybe put the REM anger aside. But Holly, what you were saying, as far as many years later, it wasn't until I read Bob Mayer's book, Trouble Boys, where Westerberg actually said, yeah, us not allowing Peter in the studio for the recording of Tim was payback for him taking the gig with REM. And I thought, that was summer of 1985. The REM thing was summer of 1983. That's a long time to hold a grudge and to pay somebody back. I was like, that really seems like some kind of messed up logic to me.
Well, passive aggressive behavior.
Yeah. That just and by that time I'd left REM. I mean, the REM gig ended up being shorter than I even anticipated. I knew it was a temporary thing while they were looking for a pro road manager. But anyway, I had already quit, working with REM and was full time with the replacements again. So